Black out with your dollars, black out with your photos, keep the information going. I want to talk about something that I don't think a lot of black men are qualified to speak about. And that's what racism has done to decent white people who are not racist and have been affected by it as well in terms of judgments that they have to make and how they have to live their lives. It's a very tenuous subject I'm about to broach, so I would ask anybody that's taking the time to listen that they listen all the way through. I've been blessed to have 3 good friends who are white, and I do not think it's a coincidence that they all share the same name. Their name is Andrew. I met the first one when I was 15, going on 16, at West Charlotte. We ran our school newspaper, The Mirror, together for a couple of years, and we still to this day keep in contact regularly. He's a lifelong friend. When I was about 19, going on 20, I met Andrew number 2. Met him in Marietta, which is where I live now. We too are now lifelong friends. I met Andrew number 3 when I was 24, going on 25 in Atlanta. We too are lifelong friends. We just spoke the other day, as a matter of fact. I just spoke to him the most recently of the 3. And I actually speak to him most infrequently of the 3. But that has a lot to do with the fact that he's the most like me. So, he might be ghost sometimes. It's not personal. Whenever we see each other or talk, we pick up wherever we left off. They have always kind of been my baseline for how I've judged and been able to gauge white people, because I don't think you can really gauge appropriately or fairly what you don't know or what you don't understand. So a lot of my understanding of white people has come from my relationship with these 3 men and the experiences that we have shared, the things that we have talked about, the dynamics that we have broached. And with some sort of a semi-frequency, we have talked about race, because part of the fact of my friendship with them is the fact that they were never afraid to talk about race, because they were not racist. You see, that was always part of the thing that drew me to them, enabled us to have a bond, even though I'm a black man with some very strong views about race and about racism. But I want to share some of the things that they've shared with me and some of the things that I've experienced personally, so I think everybody can understand how really deeply impactful like racism runs and how it affects everybody. Andrew number 3, I'll never forget, sent me some messages. It's like 1:30 in the morning on a Saturday. And this was some time ago. And he was really upset. And he had got off work. He was out back kicking it with some guys, some black guys. He worked with them, they were cool. They had been chopping it up with stuff. And he said something that they took to be as offensive. And he felt kind of offended himself, because, he's not that kind of guy. And them taking it that way made him feel a certain kind of way. And so he's literally hit me up. He was like, hey, he's like, I hate to even hit you up about this late. He was like, but am I wrong for saying this, And, and I kind of paused for a second, and I thought, and I'm like, well, because Andrew's cocky. Like I said, of the 3, he's the most like me. So I'm like, well, how did you say that? Because I know how I can be sometimes, so I know how he can be sometimes. You hanging with a couple brothers out back in Atlanta at night, And he's like, nah, he was like, it wasn't even like that on this one, dude. He was like, I was just, whatever. And I was like, well, if that's the case, they're wrong. And that brings me to my first case. Because we don't have regular contact with each other, we don't know how to take anything in jest. Everything has been super sensitive in terms of us having relationships and communication, because the race card is always in play. And since we're talking about the race card, I know a lot of people feel like that right now the race card is being played in terms of some white people, whether they're racist or not. The only race card that's ever been played in this nation was the first card played, which was when all immigrants of this country who came here from Europe united and decided to be white people. I posted a Toni Morrison interview that explained that, and I felt that was the most poignant point of that interview that needed to be recognized. So the only race card that gets played is when you call us 3/5 of a person, or when institutional racism sets in and we're not afforded the same opportunities the same way. I'm going to speak personally and honestly. In the business that I work in, there are white men that have attempted to blackball me. I'm really, really good at what I do. I think I'm great. And that has sustained me, but I'm very clear, and I know for a fact for certain there are white men, just because I am a threat, because I am black and I am intelligent and I am forward thinking, that they find me to be very problematic. And they have made attempts to circumvent me in a field, which is how I feed my family. And so racism is affecting everybody down the line, because it's affecting the relationship. You see, those black guys that were probably upset with Andrew number 3 probably never really had any relationship with any white guys either. You see, Andrew had relationship with black guys, so he's looking at them like, no, like, y'all might be full of shit. And that might be the case sometimes if we're dealing with black men who aren't educated on a level of where you've ever dealt with a white person. Like, if you've never dealt with a white person and all you're dealing with is their history, and you know their history is not good, well, how are you ever going to know that there's ever any good white people out there? And so that's just something that I want to submit. You do with that what you may. Andrew number 1 hit me up a couple of years ago. He was getting a service performed. It happened to be an older black man who was his own business owner and entity who was getting the work done. Now, Andrew is like me. He is a writer, and he is a gifted and creative one. He's very talented. He's actually a talented technically and creatively, because he is now a teacher. Andrew saw an opportunity to help this man, this older black man who owns his own business, with his business from an aspect of writing which he has a gift for. But because of the inherent racism that runs so rampant in this nation, he's sending me a message and he's like, hey, Armand, I really want to help him. And I'm thinking yeah, because that's what you're good at, not helping people necessarily, even though he is a teacher. I'm thinking, I know he's thinking the writer in him is yo, I can clean this up and he'll get so much more business. That's the writer in him talking. But because racism exists, he doesn't even know how to approach the subject, because there's the chance that something that he says might get offended. Now, keep in mind, this is already a white man who is having a black man perform a service for him. Now, racism is interfering with the progress of that, because my white friend Andrew, number 1, can actually help that black man's business, but we have these blockades, and these blockades are racism. Lastly, I'm going to get to Andrew number 2, the third one in 3 stories. I spent about 2 to 3 years where I was really close with all these guys, and I've remained in contact with these guys through all the years. And before I go any further, I want to make a couple things clear. Andrew number 3 was raised conservative, actually up here in the area that I reside in now, but he's a liberal thinker like I am. Andrew number 1 that I met at West Charlotte was, I believe, raised liberal, and for the most part, it is liberal, or at least open-minded, very open-minded individual. Number 2, who was actually the one that I've been closest to, was raised conservative and is conservative. And I can't wait to get into this. He's one of my dear, dear friends. We still speak to this day. It doesn't matter how long we don't speak. We speak openly. We speak honestly with each other. We always have. got into one argument with this man in the entirety of the almost, I think, we're going on 18, 19 years of friendship now that we have. And in all that time, we got into one argument. And it was the summer before George W. Bush was about to become president for the second time. And it was pretty much, long story short, it was your classic liberal versus conservative argument. And it was bad. Like, I can remember it was a Sunday. I came over to his house. I was reading the newspaper in his den, which is where I got the information from that upset me. Media is always spreading the shit that's igniting stuff. Yeah. And me and him, when I shared that information and my thoughts on the information, me and him got into it heavy to the point that we're literally sitting in his house on Sunday when we're supposed to be hanging out and going out and kicking it. And we're just sitting in this house stone cold silent. And he was actually the bigger man in the situation. And he was like, hey, I think what I think like this because of this and not because I'm racist. Me thinking this way and being conservative doesn't make me a racist, because for him, and I'm gonna be honest with you, he was and always has been and is to this day a businessman and extremely financially solvent and high level at that in terms of how he thinks and performs, and the results have shown itself in the life that he has and lives, and I'm very happy for him. I tell him, I big up him every chance that I can, because I'm proud of him, because I'm one of the few people that was there when he was going through college, and I watched how hard he worked. He is the product of white privilege, like every white person in his nation, but I personally watched him outwork a lot of guys who have degrees from much more prestigious institutions to get to where he is today. He has a degree from Southern Polytech. He whooped guys' ass who came from Vanderbilt, UGA, Princeton, and all that, Northwestern, and all. He waxed them all, and he is where he is. So, hard work pays off. And that is true. He'll be the first to tell you, and this is part of the honesty that we had. He understands that he has afforded the network that comes with white privilege, but at the same time, he'll also let you know, I shouldn't feel bad about it because I'm not one of these racist motherfuckers out here taking advantage of it. And he's always had a very valid point when he said that. You can't tie conservatism to racism at every turn, especially if you're not educated on what it is to truly be a conservative, especially if you don't know what it's like to have the tax person tell you that you owe instead of you get. As in, they coming to take some of your money. There are some conservatives out here that are just conservatives for the fact that they don't like the fact that they make enough money that they have to pay the government every year. I actually happen to know somebody like that, so while I don't think, and it's a fine line, that's why I'm saying listen to everything that I'm saying, but I had a different understanding, and we delved into a conversation that day where he even literally told me how I could separate the difference between who it was who was handling conservatism in a racist manner and who wasn't, down to how they dialogue with things. So I was very clear with people who, when they were sharing their conservative views, so to speak, that weren't racist, about the person who is currently residing in office. I was very, very clear that those views were conservatism tied into racism, not just conservative views. You see, there's a difference, but that gets lost because we don't communicate. And quite frankly, here's part of the problem. I have 3 Andrews. Most black people don't have one. There's a disconnect with that. Story number 2. Me and Andrew number 2 are out with another friend of ours, Colleen. Drew and Colleen have known each other since high school. Colleen was dating a gentleman named Rob, who was in the military and was overseas serving our country after the whole 9/11 thing. Rob and I had never met face to face. I was hanging out with Colleen, who was his girlfriend and is now his wife, and Drew all the time, so he had heard about me, but we had never met. Let me tell you about the first night we met. Because Rob being an upstanding individual, whether he's black or white, is the reason my black ass didn't go to jail that night. It's about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Rob had probably got in about 9 or 10. Colleen brought him over to my spot. We hung out. We kicked it for a while. And I'm going to be honest with you. Me and Drew had been getting shit-faced drunk. We were kind of like on run number 2 when we had finally sobered up and decided like, hey, let's keep it rolling. We are in our pajamas. I'm in a bathrobe. We're all in bathrobes. And we're young. We're all 21, 22 at the time. And this is my first time meeting Rob. We're like, hey, let's go grab a couple beers at the pool hall. Kick it till they kick us out, pretty much. And we're rolling. And we're rolling till the police light rolls up behind my car because I'm the one that's driving because it was my house. I had been sobered up. Colleen had just came in with her dude. They had had a couple beers, you know. Drew was fucked up. I fell asleep a little bit and sobered up. That's the only reason that I was the sober one that night. And plus, I was probably my car had the most space to fit all of us anyway. So the police pull up. And he was not a friendly gentleman at all. And I'm going to tell you something that I've always remembered to this day. I'll never forget the fear in that car actually resided with the white people in that car. That's the only time in my life I've actually felt comfortable being pulled over because I had the type of relationship with Drew and with Colleen that I knew that they were going to speak up for me and I didn't have to say a fucking word. I actually felt safe. And as soon as the cop walked up to the window and started asking me for stuff, that's exactly what they did. And he was still an asshole. Until Rob said, hey, excuse me. He said, I'm a military, active duty. He said, I just came home. He said, these are my friends. Not Drew is my friend and Colleen is my girlfriend. These are my friends. This is the first time I ever met this white guy. He's in the back seat of my car with his girlfriend, who I do know. But he said, these are my friends. I just got home literally tonight. He said, they're out with me to celebrate me coming home. I'm home, dude. The officer stops. He looks at me. He walks around to the other side of the car because Rob is on the back side of the car where I can turn around to my right and he's right there. So he walks all the way around the car. He checks Rob military ID. He lets me go. Now, I don't know if there was enough alcohol content in my system that night, but I didn't want to find out. I've never had black people speak up in a car for me like that, but that's part of the reason why this is very problematic. We're too fucking afraid to do that, whether it's one of us, two of us, three of us, or four of us. Because I also never forget the fact that part of why I was comfortable is because I knew my white friends got to speak to the police and my black ass didn't. But that's neither here nor there. It actually is, but I'm getting to a deeper point because I'm getting to point number 3 and scene number 3 with Drew number 2. Keep up with me. Drew number 2 used to come to my house when he wasn't at work or studying. If I wasn't at his house, we rolled like that for a while. This is right around the time I was recording music. So it was not uncommon if you came to my crib, you would see Drew number 2 in the studio. And I'm going to reiterate this. He is a conservative white guy. He's a white guy. He's a white guy. I mean, like walk in like tight ass tacky polo shirt, old school Milwaukee Brewers cap, fucking 60 degrees outside, no jacket wearing, open toe shoe all time, like that, like he was white. But I'm gonna tell you something that we all never forgot about Drew, and that's why everybody from my crew still ask about Drew that was around Drew and ask how he was doing. Drew was always around himself, and it resonates with black people when you're comfortable around us. We invited him in, and we still love him because he was comfortable. He never tried to be anything that he wasn't. Like, never. He was white. He would tell you that he was white. He would tell you his white ass thoughts. And if you felt like that he was out of line with something that he said, like, we had open dialogue because we knew that he was coming from a good place. Because he walked into a place that, like, quite frankly, like, regular white people like him just don't feel comfortable walking in because they think we're fucking crazy or gonna do something. It's like, nah, we like to talk shit and have a beer and do what we love to do just like you. It's just environmentally, due to the racism, we have been placed in much dire straits and situations. You would respond the same way that we do if all you saw was poverty and drugs and violence. Your environment shapes the scope. And he was so much invited that there were times, and quite frankly, there were times that I wasn't home and I would come home and he would be downstairs kicking it with my music partners and friends. Like, he had become their friends too, even down to my brothers. Regular ass conservative white boy. And he loved us, and we loved him, and we still do, and it remains. But there was that night we took him out to Buckhead, and he partied with us, and he partied the way we partied. And when I mean he partied, I mean we had a great night. It's one of the funnest nights I've ever had in Buckhead, and I've been there too many times to remember, literally. And I mean, it was such a scene, it was such a moment. He was literally the only white boy in the club. And I mean, I realized, like, where the fear was then, because I remember the black people looking like at us, because, you know, we had always said that it's like, if we take Drew, we gotta roll deep just in case there's that one drunk motherfucker or two who we may have to take care of just because he wants to be aggy about the situation. That's part of what the racism has done. We can't take our white friend out to our black spots with us without making sure we really, like, have the appropriate backup, because some other black person may trip because all this racism really is killing us. You know, so my white friend who's not racist really can't come out with us, and we have to squad up before we take him out, which is what we do. And of all nights, and I mean, we're having an awesome time. Everybody's talking to Drew. We're cool. He'll still tell you one of the funnest nights of his life until we went outside and they started shooting. And when I mean they started shooting, I mean they was close. Now, for us as black people, we might be used to certain things, but for him, he wasn't used to those things. So me and my cousin are making the usual move that we've maybe had to make one too many times because of the environment that we are raised in. You know, I can see the fear in my friend's eyes. And it shook him up. And it should have. He had been introduced to a world and to a way of doing things that he wasn't familiar with, acquainted with, and quite frankly didn't like. And I hope all of you understand that's what it's like to be black here in America every day. Like, the fear that my friend had that night, I'm very clear that's the fear that we live with every day here as black people on a multitude of levels. It's down to the little things. You don't know if something's going to happen to you at the gas station, the grocery store, the mall. I got to watch where I take my daughter. You know, they're literally snatching up black women for organs still. You know, I don't want that to be understated. You know. So there are a lot of things that white people still don't understand. Like you haven't even had the opportunity to feel some of the fear that we have to feel daily just about, like, living life. Like, there's a stress to it. That's why, you know, a lot of us have a tendency to die younger. It's in our diet, but it's also in the stress that comes from being black and being stuck here in America, and I do mean stuck. And so I want to make my last point. You've heard a lot of people say, and you've seen a lot of things being burned down. I want to remind anybody that doesn't agree with things being burned down is that, like, nobody that's black agreed with you when you burned down Black Wall Street, which was literally the highest circulation on the dollar in the U.S. economy recorded in American history, black or white. So you don't get to be hypocritical now like that happened like even 400 years ago, like when slavery started. Like that happened like literally in the past 100 years. I believe it's the 199-year anniversary was yesterday when they burned down Black Wall Street, and by they I mean white people. And Black Wall Street was created because all the black residents who wanted to live actually on the white side of town were actually forced to the other side of the railroad tracks, and they called it Little Africa, joking, and they built it into the biggest and most powerful economical structure this nation has seen to this day, and white people burned it down. So do not be hypocritical and talk about burning right now. It's definitely not your place or position. You need to understand your history and how many crosses your people have burned as well before you do so. But I also want you to understand that you see so much fear has been instilled so many ways. You see, burning is not always necessarily a bad thing. You see, sometimes when you burn things, good things come from it. So let me submit something to you all for our part. When a crop does not yield a full harvest or a proper harvest, you can probably get by and feed the people that the harvest needs to feed for a year. If you do it for a second year and the crop doesn't yield an appropriate or a proper harvest to nourish and feed those that need to be fed, things start to be problematic. We're living in a nation right now that for us as black people, there's over 400 years of our crops not being harvested properly, when we sowed every seed, and we have to watch whites reap literally the real benefits of a harvest when they literally did nothing. They did not sow the seeds, did not cultivate, but reap the benefits of the only good harvest that there is to have here in this nation. And so anybody with a sound mind that sows a seed, cultivates the crop, and doesn't yield the proper returns from the harvest, well, logically that person is going to burn it down, because here's what happens when you burn it down. Burning it down actually enriches the soil. You see, it literally wipes away all that nasty, messed up stuff that was preventing that soil from yielding the proper crop. It's been getting done for centuries by everybody. And so morally speaking, it's been over 400 years my people don't have a crop yet from any year that we can pull the harvest in and say, yeah, that was worth the work for the seeds that we sowed and for the cultivation, time, effort, literal blood, lives, psychological and physical displacement that has taken place. It's not even a question of if we have a right. It's a question if you're going to do what's right, like some did before you that helped us pass civil rights, and do it with us. Don't think that you stand on the right side of what's going on now, and don't think that you stand on the right side with God. Blackout official.